At the age of 15, a boy named Vino registered with the Adventurers Guild, where a priest subsequently revealed his God-granted talent. He had eagerly anticipated this day, only to be astonished to discover he was merely a potion user, a notoriously weak and low-ranking vocation. His sole duty entailed brewing recovery medicines in glass bottles, making his occupation uniquely mundane. While his peers received formidable classes such as warriors, warlords, martial artists, and mages, Vino alone remained in a pitiful state. Among adventurers, absolute power dictated justice, and this young man lacked even the bare minimum of combat strength. When they were inside a cave, Vino's friend holding the torch called him a useless fool and an incompetent human. Vino was too embarrassed to talk despite being a member of the A-class party Assault and their friend. The warrior named Ostel sighed and said they could win more easily if their potion master could fight a little. Rune, a mage, agreed with him, but Amina, the party's martial artist, told them Vino was trying his best for everyone. She chuckled awkwardly as she looked at Vino, but he glanced at their leader, the warrior Tommy, and ignored them. Vino had been friends with them since they were D-rankers. They all managed to get to A rank, but Vino always found himself as a burden to his team. The assault party was now inside an A-class dungeon, and its boss lurked in the deepest part of the cave, known as the Poison Cerberus. Vino thought he was at the limit of his abilities, and didn't think he could keep up with them anymore, so he decided to get out of the party once this quest was over. Their party had set a camp midway to rest. While the three were talking from afar, Amina sat in front of Vino to keep him company. He suddenly heard some footsteps behind him, so when he looked behind, he saw a shadow of a girl. When the light shined on her, her body was all bruised, and she looked drained. Vino realized that this girl was the A-class adventurer named Canadia. Upon looking at her beautiful face, he was stunned, but suddenly heard Ostel clicking a sound on his tongue. He called the girl Grim Reaper and asked why she was still alive. Canadia ignored them and continued walking wobbly. Rune sighed and hoped this girl would perish sooner because her misfortunes might spread. Vino looked at her and remembered she was an unparalleled solo A-class adventurer. Her black hair became a symbol of death in their country, and she was hated like a snake by all kinds of people. He looked worriedly at her, wondering if she had run out of healing potions. Their leader Tommy called his party to move forward, but Vino watched them walk away. The girl's hair and her state remained stuck inside his thoughts. He glanced back at her and was surprised when she fell to the ground from exhaustion. Canadia used her sword to get up, but was too weak. Vino did not hesitate to walk up to her and call her. She looked up and did not respond. He knelt and said he saw her wounds, and asked if she had been on a hell of a quest. Canadia looked away and said she didn't know him, and it was none of his business. That cold reply struck through his heart, but he pulled out 2 bottles of healing potion, despite that cold treatment, and handed it to her. Her face was saying it looked suspicious as she looked away, hurting Vino's ego because he did everything from scratch by hand. He opened the other bottle and chugged it to show her it was safe. He handed the last one to her and told her it had no poison on it. He shoved it into his hand, leaving her speechless. Vino smiled at her as he walked away and told her to give it a try. Canadia left her mouth open in confusion. After a few seconds, she looked at the potion. Despite having suspicions it was poison, she drank and finished the last drop. Her eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe the potion had healed her wounds in an instant. It was her first time encountering such an incredible potion. Meanwhile, the assault party was now facing the 3-headed Cerberus. Tommy gave Ostel and Amina a signal, so the two launched an attack in a leap. Rune was given a cue to cast her magic attack with her staff. Vino suddenly called her and said it was potion time. He threw the bottle in her direction, which perfectly landed in her mouth. She chugged the potion and dropped it immediately. Her magic attack became bigger and stronger after consuming it. After years of training, Vino could throw potions straight into his team's mouths to perfection. His team suddenly demanded some potions simultaneously, and when the battle was over, Amina commended everyone's work. Ostel scoffed and said he did all the work, but Vino remained silent and checked on the remaining potion he had. He had stayed up all night making these. Their leader called him and said since they had completed the 20th A-rank quest, they earned the right to challenge the S-rank promotion test. Tommy smiled and thanked him for being there for them all this time. Vino was feeling at ease since he could leave the party peacefully. Tommy shook his hand and said he wanted to make a name for himself, making Vino flinch in shock when he felt the cold metal through his stomach. Tommy grinned and thanked him for his work. Vino started screaming in pain as he curled his body. Rune chuckled as she chanted her attack and lit his back on fire. Vino screamed in pain while she apologized for her hands having just slipped. His body was shivering, asking them why, and Tommy said they only wanted to take advantage of the compensation system. Ostel added that if one of their members perishes, they will get a hefty compensation payout. Tommy glanced at Amina and told her to accept it if she was a member of their party. His face looked crooked as he said they should dispose of the useless one and let a healing mage in who could fight with holy magic. Vino couldn't believe the people whom he calls friends were so corrupt that he would resort to this. Tommy took his bag filled with healing potions because he said it was bought with their money. They all smiled at him and told him not to worry because his hometown would receive a portion of the compensation. Tommy said if his family heard that Vino perished with honor, they would be glad, but Vino cursed him, so Tommy tried to pierce his throat. However, a loud roar echoed and startled everyone. They looked around nervously because the ground started shaking. A huge foot was walking up to them, and it was from a gigantic tyrant dragon. They were were shocked to see an S-rank monster inside an A-rank dungeon, so Tommy told Rune to release an attack. She blew an attack on its face and said they should make Vino as bait. The four immediately ran away while looking back at Vino, except Amina. He was speechless and was losing hope at this point. He remembered the emergency potions on his leg, but when he looked at the dragon, he knew it would be impossible for him to escape. When the dragon growled at him, he thought his life had never been any better. He left his hometown to become an adventurer despite having the weakest job. The assault party welcomed him and opened arms, but when he was about to leave, he was betrayed. All he could hope now was for his family to get some of that money in exchange for his life. He closed his eyes tightly, but he was surprised when he heard the grunt of a woman. He opened his eyes and was shocked to see the long black hair before his eyes. Canadia stood there and said the dragon almost got him. Vino asked her why she suddenly came to save him, and she said it was because he had given her a healing potion earlier. Vino was flabbergasted and couldn't believe she would step in for that. Canadia added that it was their family tradition to return the favor to someone who helped them and dashed forward to attack. Vino suddenly remembered the remaining potions, so he grabbed one and quickly drank it. He wiped off his mouth and looked ahead. She was still fighting off the dragon, so he screamed and told her to run away. Canadia was too busy holding off the dragon, but when the creature found an open spot on her abdomen, it swung its tail and smashed it onto her belly. Canadia gasped in pain and crashed her back into the wall nearby. She slammed to the ground, so Vino rushed to her, telling her she should escape while she could. Canadia stood up slowly while saying he would be killed if she escaped, so she told him to run. Vino got worried and said he couldn't run away without her. She said she had reached her limit fighting alone, but was filled with joy when she got his potion. She looked down and said it would be an honor if she perished protecting him. Despite being tired, Canadia held her sword firmly and sprinted towards the monster. This lone adventurer lived a life full of scars since becoming A-rank. Vino thought he would do everything he could to save Canadia. He knew it might work if he acted as bait and healed Canadia with one potion. He gritted his teeth as he thought about his family. He sprinted and thought he had never thrown a potion with full force before, so he just hoped this distraction would not go to waste. He swung his arm, holding a potion, and threw it toward the dragon's direction with full force. The bottle travels through the air in a swift. The tyrant dragon was surprised by the painful explosion from that attack, so Vino wondered if his tactic worked. He got confused when the dragon was screaming and wobbling side to side. Canadia asked for a potion, so he threw one straight to her, which surprised her. She gulped it immediately and dropped it to the floor. She activated the first blade, called Fallen Leaves, and swung it through the dragon's neck. The dragon's body fell to the ground in defeat. There was a moment of silence afterward, but Vino's head started to feel light. His vision was getting blurry, and he eventually passed out. After a few minutes, Vino gained consciousness. He looked around and realized he was resting on her lap. Canadia smiled and said he was knocked down right after she slayed the dragon, but Vino's face was turning red because the thought of lap pillows might be kicking in. He suddenly realized he hadn't introduced himself, so he said his name and asked if her name was Canadia. She nodded and asked what happened to him, because she remembered seeing him at his party, but now he was alone. He sighed and thought he had to be honest with her, so he explained everything. When he was done, Canadia thought it was terrible for him to go through that. Vino sighed and thought if he went and sued them, it would be a big problem because, despite being in A rank, if he spoke up, nobody might believe him. He stood up, but was surprised when Canadia said he was a special person. He asked why, so she said he was the one who broke the dragon's neck, and not even a giant golem punch could do that. Vino couldn't believe it and chuckled, saying he was only a potion master. Canadia said his potion healed all of her wounds, and he could even throw the bottles during the battle with pinpoint accuracy. It seemed like Vino thought it was normal for him, but when he said he could even throw it without looking, Canadia gasped in shock and said that would be impossible. He asked if it was really great, so she sighed and said his old party, and he seemed pretty ignorant about it. He looked at the empty bottle and wondered if he could still continue being an adventurer. Canadia said he would be heading out now. She walked away, and the sight of her back made him remember how she fought earlier. He was astonished by it, so he spoke. He walked to her and called her. He asked if she would like to form a party with him, but Canadia had a second thought. She asked if he only wanted to be at a party with her because of her black hair, but her eyes widened when he said he found her hair beautiful. Vino explained that he wanted to keep looking at her and her black hair because it was beautiful. He found her very beautiful, so he wanted to form a party with her. He said those things, leaving no crumbs and making her face turn red. She didn't know what to say, so he grabbed her hand and told her to come with him and be his. She stroked her hair and said she would definitely marry him the next day in town. She waved goodbye and charmingly said, "I'll see you later, my dear." Vino was speechless. He couldn't believe that he would be marrying that girl that fast. He only wanted to form a party with her and admire her black hair, but he ended up getting married, and this is the beginning of the story of the potion user and his bride. Wow, that was the fastest proposal and acceptance I've seen so far. The beautiful Eggbard was known as the town of crafts. It was where the guild stood. Vino went there while holding a bag. When he got inside, there were many people, but the girl on the counter smiled and welcomed Vino. This girl was Milva. She asked why he went there and if he was with the assault team. He chuckled awkwardly and figured the news of his death hadn't reached this town yet. He sighed, said he quit that party, and told her not to ask for details about it. Milva was surprised and apologized for hearing it. She talked about the paperwork and said it was nice to have an A-rank adventurer there, but Vino chuckled awkwardly and said he doesn't have A-rank power. When he was done at the guild, he went to sell the body parts of the S-rank monster they defeated. The butcher knew it was high-value meat, so Vino was shocked upon seeing the payment. He couldn't believe he would earn this much, but Vino bought many potions thanks to that. He returned to the inn and thought he would give some of the potions to Canadia when she arrived tomorrow. He turned the knob to his door, and his eyes widened when a familiar voice welcomed him. Canadia was wearing an apron with ruffles as she asked if he would like to eat or take a bath first. She chuckled and asked if he would like to take her first instead. Vino dropped the bag to the floor in shock. His body was shaking, baffled by what was happening. He was expecting to see her the next day, but she chuckled sweetly and said she couldn't wait to be with him. He noticed her luggage and asked if she would be moving into his house. Canadia smiled brightly and said it would be natural for them to live in one house while they were getting married. Vino dropped his jaw in disbelief. He couldn't think of a way to explain it to her, but when she gave off a charming look and asked if he would like to try the food she made, his face was steaming hot as he nodded. He sat down at the dining chair, surrounded by delicious meals. He looked at her with a serious face and said they should talk. She excitedly slammed the table for her first face-to-face meeting with a party member. Vino choked with his saliva from shock because of her character changes. She said it was only natural for a wife to show her real side to her husband, but Vino's image of that gallant, cold-haired girl crumbled to pieces. He noticed she kept calling him San, which was formal, so he told her to drop the formality. She nodded and agreed with his suggestion. He asked for his age while slicing meat, and was shocked to know she was only 16 years old. Vino was 19 at this point, so he was impressed that she was already an A-rank. He was amazed at how she got into her position within 2 years. She was quite the prodigy, but he flinched when she slammed the table and exclaimed she was a devoted woman. Sweat was dripping from his face as he said yes. After a few days together, they went to the guild after seeing a B and C rank quest on the paper posted on the wall. Milva was glad Vino paired up with another A-ranker. He asked if there were any new quests, but she said there were none. She also thanked Canadia for gathering herbs the other day, and replied with a cold nod. Vino felt a shiver down his spine after seeing her character change again. Some people around them suddenly thought it was funny for a useless A-rank and the Grim Reaper to team up. They could hear them saying that the rumor about them defeating an S-rank dragon was fake, so Canadia just pulled him aside and said they should leave now. Vino sighed and thought he couldn't take it when people badmouth his comrades. While they were preparing some traps, Vino told her to prepare for battle, but he noticed she wasn't responding, so he called her again. Canadia flinched in surprise. Vino asked if she was alright and if it was about the men in the guild earlier. She sighed and said she was used to people talking things about her, but she thought it gave him a bad reputation for being with her. Vino didn't expect Canadia to feel the same as he did, so he told her he had mocked them as well ever since, and he didn't care about reputation at this point. He grabbed her arms and reminded her that he was the one who invited her to the party, out of love for her black hair. Her heart felt lighter after hearing it, so she smiled at him and thanked him. Out of nowhere, they heard a screaming. Vino figured they had already got a wolf in the trap. Upon seeing the growling wolves, Canadia said she would always take 3 steps backward to support him, but he was already trembling in fear because he had to fight in the front. They stood firmly while holding their weapons. Canadia told him to watch her back when the wolves surrounded them. Vino nodded and thought he also needed to practice because, up until now, he had been a support, and he wanted to learn how to attack. He grabbed the bottle in his pocket and swung his arm to make a perfect throw. The potion struck the wolf's face, and he was knocked out. The remaining 3 growled in anger. Canadia huffed and thought she would take them his time, but Vino threw the potion at them. A pair of wolves came out, so she thought this would be her chance, but Vino defeated them again. He smiled as he picked up the bottle on the ground, but was shocked to see her drop to her knees. She was crying like a baby, and saying she was useless, so he nervously said they would find a stronger monster she could take on. The night was getting colder, and later, they set up a bonfire to cook their dinner, and planned to take turns sleeping. When the food was ready, she commented that it tasted good. She was surprised that eating food with somebody would be this nice. He asked why she had become an adventurer, and she said it was because of her black hair. He got confused, so she said their family lived a modest life, and her father passed down the technique of wielding the odachi, or the sword. It was a legend that black-haired people wreaked havoc, so up until now, their kind tried to live in hiding to escape persecution. Seeing a black-haired human was rarely seen at this time. Her parents told her to live in hiding, but she wondered why she would get persecuted because of her hair color. She wanted to change how people see her, so she worked hard toward her dream of becoming an S-ranker and achieving great honor to wipe out the discrimination and stigma on black-haired people. Since she became an A-rank, she stumbled upon more combats, and when she survived each battle, she just received insults. Canadia was so happy when Vino invited her to a party, and she even said her hair looked beautiful. She added that she took good care of her hair and figured she would fall in love if someone ever told her how beautiful her hair was. Vino smiled and said he would support her. He said he was still figuring out what to do after getting kicked out from this old party, but now he knew he wanted to support Canadia's dream. Vino added that he would stand by her side and support each other from this point. He smiled widely, making her heart flutter like a flying chicken inside her stomach. She giggled and promised she would be the best wife for him. He sighed and told her they should do their best for tomorrow's quest. After a few hours, Canadia fell asleep first, so Vino Vino got a better view of her face. She thought she had a beautiful face and wondered if it was too selfish, if he wanted to stay by her side. He smiled and said he wouldn't let anyone call him incompetent anymore. She was sleeping so soundly, so he leaned closer and whispered that they should work hard tomorrow. But he flinched when Canadia grabbed his shoulder. She started headlocking him unconsciously. He wanted to scream because it was painful, but he didn't want to wake her up. He just cursed because she was too cute to dream like this. The morning came, and Canadia was full of energy again, while Vino looked like a zombie for getting wrestled all night. When they arrived at the abandoned church where gargoyles inhabited it, they opened the door and searched the area. They looked around and noticed there were 3 gargoyles nearby. He asked her if they could handle them, so she said yes because she was not alone anymore. The two prepared for battle and let their guard up. The monster was grinning at them, so Canadia took the first move to advance. The monster lifted their hands and released a blinding beam from their palms. Canadia was caught off guard, but luckily she dodged it. She was surprised because it was her first time seeing that attack. He told her to open her mouth and threw a bottle at her to chug. She could feel the potion burning up inside her body. Vino said it was a recovery and strength-enhancing potion. With her body feeling lighter now, she went back to advancing to the gargoyles, and using her third form, circular move, she sliced their bodies in half. The monster turned to ashes after meeting defeat. Vino was in awe of her flowy hair again. Canadia turned and asked if she could help him this time, so he nodded. They head out to return to the guild, and midway, Vino said he could now slowly catch up to her speed. She suddenly turned red. She said she was embarrassed when he had to put something that big inside her mouth. Which was the bottle, okay? You and your dirty mind. Vino chuckled and said the guys at his old party got used to it. Canadia had proven that Vino wasn't useless at all. He said he hadn't considered using his potion for the attack. Canadia said those people really had no eyes because he had good intentions, potions, and accurate in long-distance throwing. He just shrugged his shoulders, so she sighed and said she was grateful he was now by her side. Vino was surprised to feel her sincerity. He smiled and figured that the trust from true comrades made him feel at ease and happy. As the two were having a nice day, some people were having the hardest time of their lives. Inside the dungeon, a monster was facing Vino's old party. They were getting frustrated because they couldn't even beat this weak monster like they used to. This is what they get for underestimating support. Well, good thing that Karma is a witch. They barely managed to defeat the monster, even if they were all qualified to become S-rankers. Tommy told Ostel to shut his stinky mouth, as he knew to himself they got this exhausted just from fighting weak monsters. He was surprised when Amina spoke while crying, saying she missed Vino's cream soup and that things would be easier for them if he were there. Ostel told him not to talk about that guy, but Amina said Vino was good at cooking and camping. Tommy gritted his teeth as he remembered that Vino was alive, and he thought he was going to spread some wild rumors, but nothing happened. Ostel cursed and said this happened because the new healer was useless, and they might kick him out. The healer named Gal gasped in shock, and said they were the ones who were incompetent because he came from the royal capital. Ostel screamed at him, saying his movements were below B rank, but Gala did not back down. He said Ostel was a warrior who didn't have firepower, but went offensive. He pointed at Amina and said she was a martial artist who couldn't even defend herself, and Rune was a mage with low mana reserve. They all got roasted by Gal. Seeing them facing reality was pretty satisfying. Runa sighed and said if Vino were there, things would be different. Gal went to Tommy and said he was a leader who doesn't give orders, and no one was scouting, so they were being attacked. He was getting frustrated by all of their crap, so he told them recovery magic could only heal a few wounds, and said the guy they kicked out must have been really good. He even wished he had teamed up with Vino. Amina said they could keep fighting if they had Gal's healing and Vino's potions, but Tommy didn't like it. He asked if they were asking that useless guy for help, but they avoided his gaze in fear. The surroundings started trembling in a blink. Ostel was surprised to see a dragon before them, so Tommy told them to retreat while they tried to hold it off, because they couldn't beat this dragon in their state. On the other hand, Canadia and Vino walked to the dragon, where he has thrown his potion. They had only fought B-rank monsters for the past weeks, and he could beat them down just by throwing a potion at them. Nokia might have made these potions. That crap was hard as you 1-week-old poop. Canadia sighed and said she didn't even have the chance to fight. He chuckled awkwardly and said it couldn't be helped. She asked if she would be kicked out because she was pretty useless, but he reminded her that he needed her in the front line. Her face brightened, and she started saying a wife should always support her husband. Vino thought that if he could throw these at high speed, he could defeat anything, and that even a calamity demonic beast might lose against it. As they were crossing the water, Vino suggested moving to a trading town to take on some A-rank quest. Canadia nodded and said she would keep him safe until they got to the town, since they didn't have anything to do because they already finished every B-rank quest. Canadia smiled and asked him to walk around the city. When they got back to the city, Vino was waiting outside the building for Canadia, and he was getting nervous because this would be his first time alone with a girl who loved him. His heart was racing as he knew she was practicing married life with him, and going on a date could make him go crazy. When Canadia got out, he almost dropped his jaw to the floor in shock. She changed her black clothes into a bright flowy dress for their date. Her black hair and eyes stood out, and she looked pretty. Vino's face was steaming hot, and they could even cook an egg on that hot face at this point. She grabbed his hand and pointed to somewhere to go. He took a deep breath and said he didn't know she had clothes like this. She explained that she always wanted to walk in the streets in cute dresses, but whenever people saw her hair, They sometimes threw rocks at her, and she didn't want her dress to get dirty. She suddenly gasped in excitement when she spotted the ice cream vendor nearby. She started drooling, so he asked her if she wanted some. Vino bought them, and it made her really happy. Since they were leaving tomorrow, they spent the rest of the day going around the city and even watched the sunset together. Canadia enjoyed every second, so she hoped they could always go around the trading town like this. Vino suddenly stopped because Canadia stood there looking at him and said he had remained by her side, despite how the people treated her. She said it was unfortunate that the Grim Reaper was before him, but he said it didn't matter if the Grim was cute like her. While the two were joking around, a little boy was running and suddenly bumped Canadia's side. She slightly wobbled, but the kid apologized to her. Vino frowned his brows and suddenly realized that the place was pretty wide, and bumping into anyone was impossible unless it was intended. He flinched upon realizing it. He asked where Canadia was hiding her wallet, so she kept it inside her skirt at the back when she said it. She gasped in shock when he started patting and pinching her butt. Her face was so red, and she said if Vino had wanted it, he could have just said it. He told her to stop because her wallet had been stolen. Her flushed face turned pale in shock. They walked to the streets, going somewhere. She didn't expect she would get robbed, so she asked how he knew it. He said it happened a few times when he was still in the assault part because of the town's poor security. She suddenly remembered how he touched her butt, so she pinched his cheeks. Vino ignored her and said they had arrived, but she was surprised they were in front of the orphanage. 3 little boys gathered in the back of the building. The boy with glasses was amazed at how Dino managed to steal one of his wallets. Dino opened the wallet, said it wasn't a big deal, and counted the money inside. They were pretty disappointed by the amount, making Vino more pissed. He called the boy and asked him to return the wallet he stole. The kids were shocked, but Dino told them to show some proof. Vino gave them a gloomy gaze and asked them what poison he wanted to drink, or if he wanted to drink the potion of truth. Canadia tried to tell him to be nicer to the kids, but when the kids saw her face up close, they were amazed by her beautiful face and long black hair. Her face turned red, distracting Vino's seduction tactic on the kid, because compliments easily swayed Canadia. He looked back at the kid and told him to return it immediately, but another girl with wounds on her legs came asking the kids what they were doing there. Ali asked if Dino went out again to pickpocket. She bonked his head for causing trouble to others again. Vio scoffed and said they were A-rankers and they could do anything with this orphanage. The kid with glasses started shivering in fear, making Canadia ask if they really had that kind of right, but he said it was only a bluff to scare them. She sighed and calmly asked him to return the wallet, because it was a precious gift from her mother. Dino started panicking because they said they were A-rankers, so he told them the truth that he thought he could get away from an old man and a girl with a silly face. The two flinched from the insult they got from the kid, but before they could talk, a woman came rushing, asking what was happening. The kids gasped in shock. She ran to the kids and begged them not to hurt the children. Vino said one of the kids stole his partner's wallet, and they went there to ask him to return it. The woman placed her hand on his shoulder to ask him about the wallet, but Dino accidentally dropped the wallet. The woman gasped in shock. She took the wallet, immediately apologized to Canadia, and said she would accept whatever punishment awaited her. She kept begging them and asking them to forgive the child, but Canadia said it was fine if she got her wallet back. Vino took a potion out and asked the girl named Ali to drink it. She was surprised by the sudden offer, so he walked to her and told her not to worry because it was not poisonous. Despite having doubts, Ali drank it. The woman tried to stop her because they might pay for it, but Ali had already finished it. She was surprised at how sweet and delicious it was. Her wounds had healed up and her body didn't hurt anymore. The woman was speechless by what she witnessed. She bowed and said she was glad her wounds healed, but they couldn't afford to pay for the potion. Vino smiled and told her they could just have water in exchange. They went inside and the kids brought them chairs to sit on. The woman gives them water and doesn't know how to thank them anymore. Dino suddenly excitedly called him an old man and asked if he made those potions earlier. He sighed and said he was still young. The woman said she was the headmaster named Pira and formally apologized for Dino's naughty behavior. Vino introduced himself and said his partner was named Canadia. He leaned closer to Dino and reminded him that stealing was not worth it and that it would only cause trouble for everyone. Dino nodded, but got distracted when he heard the other kids compliment Canadia's long black hair. They loved her and her hair, and it made her feel like living in clouds. He asked if these kids didn't know about the legend, so Pira nodded and said she tried not to teach them anything discriminatory. She was once scared of the black hair due to the legend, but looking at Canadia made her feel like it was just a tale from the old days because she had a very kind face. He suddenly wondered what could happen if Canadia found more people she could trust with no hate and discrimination. Dino called him uncle, but Vino grunted and told him to call him Nichin instead. Dino asked if Canadia was as strong as him because they were both A-rankers, and told them to kick those guys' butt out. Pira stopped him from speaking and told Vino to forget about it. She covered his mouth and apologized for it. Vino smiled and told her to tell him anything if they needed help, but she remained silent. Dino was staring at the headmaster for seconds, and after some thinking, Pira asked if he knew about Don Guillaume from the trading town. He nodded as he knew he was the boss of the Guillaume Merchant Guild, and he had heard nothing good about him, so some called him a sociopath. Tommy told him not to associate himself with them because those people hate adventurers, but he always thought Guillaume was giving him some money. Pira said some of his men had been coming there because they wanted to give up the children to build the new facility on the property. Dino nodded and said they would use the children as a slave to make a profit. Vino sighed and told her they should put the safety of the children first. He told Dino that they were placed in the royal capital, where they took in children and were assigned to work. Pyrrha became worried about the cost because they didn't have enough resources to send the kid there. Vino volunteered to be their escort. He looked at Canadia's happy face with the kids and thought he would do this for Canadia. Pyrrha was surprised and glad about the news, so she thanked him. Meanwhile, Canadia suddenly froze. Her face went blank as she looked at the door. The kids noticed it and asked what was wrong. Vino heard them, so he walked to her and asked if she was alright. Canadia said she had a bad feeling and asked if all of the kids were there, but Pyrrha said there was one more who went to shop. Canadia sprinted outside, and when she opened the main door, they were shocked to see 4 men in black suits. Vino figured out who these men were. They had the little girl in their hand, and she was crying in fear. Pyrrha called Mana's name worriedly, but the men told them it was about time to clean up the orphanage. Vino asked if there was some trouble at the merchant guild, because Pyrrha was supposed to have a week before deciding what to do with the orphanage. The men scoffed as they figured they were adventurers, so they told them not to meddle with their business. Vino asked if their business was about holding a knife to a child's neck, and if their boss really gave them a week before going there, but the 4 remained silent. It looks like these monkeys acted on their own. The man in the front told him to shut up, and said they just needed the headmaster's sign in exchange for the child. When Canadia walked to the front with her dark, eerie aura, Vino was surprised. She cracked her knuckles and asked if she could just kick their butts. The man holding the child chuckled devilishly and told the headmaster to make the decision. Pyrrha was trembling in fear and anxiousness, but Vino told him she didn't have to sign that stupid contract. She was confused when he walked to them, making the men wonder what this potion master could do to them. Vino smirked and said he could defeat them with this potions. Think fast, chucklenuts. They looked at Vino disgustingly and looked like they would attack any time. Vino thought these subordinates might overpower him because of their number, making him worried if he could handle them, so he took the first move. He threw 2 bottles at the 2, which made them lose their consciousness. The man in front was dumbfounded and clueless about what happened. The man holding the girl cursed in the air, making the adventurers think that using the hostage as a shield would now be pointless. Vino gave Canadia a sign, so he immediately threw the bottle toward the man holding the girl, and it caught him off guard. Canadia quickly ran and grabbed Mana out of them. The headmaster was surprised and relieved that the child was finally safe, but the last man standing told them not to get cocky. Vino knew they would act as a deterrent if they managed to escape, but to their shock, the man called someone from behind. He couldn't believe a man wearing Japanese clothing and a samurai. The man grinned at them and said he would take their souls out of their bodies. Vino somehow got nervous because this was his first time seeing his kind in their region. When the man ran towards Vino, Canadia warned him and luckily leaned backward in time. That swing of the sword was so strong that it chopped the tree. Vino looked at Canadia and told her to protect the headmaster and the kids. He was sweating cold because he knew he had no combat skills other than potion throwing. He didn't know if it would work as his defense, so when the man lifted his sword and swung it at him, he went against its direction with his potion and managed to deflect it. The man was speechless from what he had witnessed. Vino was able to pull off his new defense technique called potion parry. He smiled because his technique worked, but the man in the suit cursed and told the samurai guy to do his job properly because he paid a high amount for this. Vino figured this man was a mercenary who was greedy for money or only served for pay or reward. He thought of throwing a potion with all of his might, but he sighed because his head might blow up and traumatize the kids. Vino had no time to waste now, so he threw the potion at him. The man lifted his samurai, preparing for defense, but Vino remained calm. The moment when the potion was deflected, the trajectory went to his groin. He screamed in pain and fainted on the ground. Vino smiled because he had to make a name for his new technique. The man in a suit pulled the mercenary and dragged him out of the orphanage. Vino wondered if it would be alright to let them escape, but he got distracted when Canadia embraced him from the back. He looked back with blushing cheeks and heard her saying Vino was amazing and was certain the husband she had always longed for. When Vino reminded her that everyone was watching, Canadia flinched in embarrassment. Dino didn't see them getting mushy, but he removed Pyrrha's hands and told Vino he wanted to become a strong potion-using adventurer like him someday. Vino smiled and told him to stop pickpocketing because he would not have to protect Pyrrha and the others. Dino chuckled and agreed with him. The moon was at its peak when they decided to go back inside, but suddenly, a loud scary siren was heard. They got nervous, so Canadia said it was from the guild that warned the residents. The 2 adventurers knew something was wrong because they hadn't heard it in years. Pyrrha told them to be careful. Vino replied, saying she should gather the kids and keep them safe. They said goodbye to them, and the kids waved and thanked them. When they got to the guild, the place was buzzing, and some adventurers were there. Milva spotted them and greeted them with a smile. She was relieved that 2 A-rankers went there. Vino asked what happened, and she said it was really bad and said she would call the guildmaster for the meeting. Canadia noticed that Milva might seem to look at things with ease and carefreeness, but she knew this situation might be serious. She had been talking to her because Milva was the kind of person who didn't shy away from black-haired people. The guildmaster appeared and apologized for keeping them waiting. He sighed when Milva reported that they gathered only 18 adventurers. Vino asked if a powerful monster had appeared in their town, so the guildmaster nodded and said a calamity-class cannonball dragon named Blani was in their town in the morning. Vino's eyes widened in shock because he knew it would take dozens of people to defeat that calamity monster. The guildmaster said his father would explain the appearance of the demonic beast. An old man walked to the front and said the cannonball appears once every 60 years, and it was known to destroy everything on their path. A major street was built in their town for the beat to pass through, and it always went through a straight path. Vino looked at the map and thought the path wasn't straight. Maybe the dragon was gay. Just kidding. The old man said the chief 30 years ago said the dragon wouldn't appear anymore, so they built houses in the path where the dragon was passing despite his opposition. When Kanadia noticed that the dragon was heading to the orphanage, they got more worried. Milva said they hadn't heard any response from the royal capital because they were also busy with some strong monsters that appeared in their area, while the assault party said they had nothing to do with them. Vino gritted his teeth upon hearing his previous party. He knew that things would get harder because he and Kanadia were the only A-rankers present. Kanadia walked to him and said she wanted to protect those children. He nodded and said he couldn't turn a blind eye to them after saving them from those bad guys. Vino looked at everyone and said they should make a plan to stop the monster from advancing using their team. Two adventurers scoffed as they glanced at Kanadia and said the Grim Reaper brought the dragon to their town, but Vino spoke and told them not to speculate and devalue her when she was stronger than all of them combined. The two were speechless, so Vino asked the guildmaster to hold a strategy meeting. Kanadia asked if he was alright, but he patted her shoulder and said this would be her chance to be the savior of this town. After their preparations, the morning came, and the cannonball dragon appeared in their town. Vino noticed the Calamity-class dragon had turrets from within its body like a machine. The evacuation was going well at this point. There were 6 heavy warriors to hold the dragon off, 6 warriors that would attack its legs and provide firepower, and 4 mages to destroy the cannon fired from the beast. This is the tactical formation they formed, standing shoulder to shoulder. It was Vino's first time being assigned to be charged with command in a Calamity-class quest. He suddenly heard a voice behind him. Milva was sweating, as she said she was very nervous because bullets might hit them in their lookout post. She was fidgeting in anxiety, so Vino told her that if something happened, they could use the gliding gear to get out of there. He grabbed her shoulder and said he would be counting on her to be his assistant, but she sighed and whispered she was only a receptionist earlier. If the dragon followed the same route, the town would suffer heavy losses, so they had to force it to redirect. Vino's goal was different. He wanted to use Kanadia's fighting power to their advantage, so they could defeat it. If he could make her the hero of this subjugation, the legend of the black hair would break. Milva pulled him and said the dragon had passed through the main gate and was now entering the main street. The people in their guild started getting nervous upon seeing the dragon face to face. The warriors who had to hold it off didn't expect it to be this big, so Vino used his megaphone to tell them to hold it off and gave a sign to the attacker team to slash the legs, so the swordsmen ran to the sides immediately. Milva's heart was pounding, and she couldn't believe that in her first year as a receptionist, she would be taking part in such a crazy quest. She looked at Vino and asked how he could carry this amount of potions. Vino said there was supposed to be a limit for adventurers to carry, but since he was a potion maker, he broke the limit, and his storage was close to 1,000. Mila gulped in amazement and confusion at what he was saying. Suddenly, an adventurer called him and said a mage needed some healing, so he threw a bottle at her mouth and she chugged it in. Milva was surprised and said potions were supposed to be drunk with your hand, but he said he could just shove them into their mouth and chug down. Kanadia was now advancing toward the dragon, and when she took a huge leap, she activated the 4th form called Cherry Blossom. Mid-air, she slashed the attack at the dragon's face, making it roar in pain. Milva was in awe of the movements of an A-ranker like Kanadia. The first time she came to the town, she heard about the legend and about Kanadia. She was a little scared of her, but even if she was in shambles, Kanadia could still complete the quest. She thought Kanadia was so persecuted, yet she didn't give up. She noticed that her mood had brightened up since she was with Vino, because when she asked if she had feelings for Vino, her face blushed, and she talked adorably. They promised to go shopping the next time, so Milva was hoping to be good friends with her. She clasped her hands together and prayed for Kanadia to come back safely. Vino threw a bottle as he called Kanadia and told her they would go with their plan A. She caught it and grinned at him, but Milva started coughing from the smoke that suddenly appeared. Vino looked closer and said it was from the main weapon, the cannon on the dragon's back. When the smoke faded, huge and multiple cannons flashed before their eyes. Vino was surprised and asked why it had evolved this much. In a split second, the monster released numerous missiles in the air. The people screamed in fear and tried to run away, but Kanadia bravely moved toward the back of the cannonball dragon. Milva gasped in shock and thought they had to stop her now, but Vino told her he had thrown an A-type magic powder at her that would connect to the 200 potions they had up there. He added that it contains magic metal that would attract all of these potions like a missile. When Milva noticed the bottles were starting to shake, electricity currents sparked, and one by one, the bottles levitated and moved quickly in the dragon's direction. This tactic was for their potion missiles, and when they landed on the dragon's skin, multiple explosions occurred, and the damage made the monster wheel in pain. Milva was left speechless by the sight, yet Vino was smiling on the side, proud of their plan's outcome. Now that the dragon had gone down from the impact, Vino told the others to move forward. All of the members quickly went to their positions and attacked all at once. Milva was in awe of what she was witnessing. She felt like she was inside a movie. However, things did not go according to their plan. The cannonball suddenly growled loudly, which could almost tear one's eardrums. It suddenly froze. They did not move an inch, which which made them raise their guards. Vino immediately told everyone to retreat. He grabbed Milva and told her to hold on tight. Her cheeks turned red because she was too close to him, making her say that she did like older men as they glided down the tower. When they got down, Milva noticed something was off with the dragon. He replied, saying the dragon would release a heat ray that would incinerate everything from its core after that roar. Milva started sweating cold and asked why they were still there and if they would get hit by that burning beam. Vino nodded and said that beans could turn bones into ashes, so Milva started whining because she didn't even have a boyfriend yet before perishing. She shook his body while Vino said running would be useless now. She begged and embraced him tightly, so he said he would do something with the potions left in his inventory. The dragon took a deep breath, and a blinding orb suddenly emerged from its mouth. He noticed Milva sobbing like a scared kid, so Vino told her to trust him and took the special explosive potion. The bright orb became bigger, so he lifted his arm and swung it back to make a stronger throw. The potion was released in a straight projectile, and a deafening explosion occurred when it collided with the dragon's mouth. A strong wind swirled around the area, and when the smoke faded, the dragon was revealed unscathed. It glared at them, making Vino curse because his attack did nothing to it. He looked up and told Canadia to proceed with Plan B. Canadia nodded and jumped out to end this battle quickly. Mid-air, Vino told her to be careful and threw an open bottle towards her mouth. It landed in her mouth, and she chugged it quickly. Her body felt lighter after chugging it, but in Milva's eyes, it was like a man feeding a fish. Canadia's body felt a tingling sensation that accumulated on her back, and in a blink, white feathers grew out from her back. The wings flapped, and she flew in the air like an angel. Milva was speechless by her beauty. Vino smiled and said it was a potion for levitation for a certain amount of time. Milva looked back at Candia and said she looked beautiful with those wings. Even everyone froze in amazement at her beauty, making Vino chuckle and say it was truly stunning. Canadia fixed her eyes on the dragon and pulled out her blade. She moved to her first form and swiftly pierced the tip of the sword through the stone on its head. She screamed as she pushed the blade deeper, and it eventually created another explosion after releasing the dead leaf technique. After a few seconds, the smoke was lessened. Canadia went down after ensuring that the dragon was defeated. Vino smiled at her and thought it was all thanks to their angel that they defeated a calamity-class monster. Canadia rushed to him happily because they finally defeated the monster. In the next 7 days, the town was continuously recovering from the damage, and it had been hard work for all of the adventurers all week. Candia was so happy that the orphanage was safe, and the Guillaume Merchant Guild had stopped bothering them, because the possibility of another giant monster appearing in that direction was still high. Vino walked inside the guild and was greeted by Milva's smile. He greeted her back and was surprised that other adventurers thanked him for his hard work and called him the potion maniac. They praised him and kept calling him the potion maniac, but Vino found it like an insult. Milva laughed at him from his reaction. When two girls passed by, they shrieked in fear upon seeing the potion maniac, making Vino wonder why these girls acted like that. Milva explained they got scared because he got angry at them for not drinking his potion in the battle and had to tell them he would fill their gaping mouths full of white stuff with this big potion. He flinched when two girls approached him and said they liked his nickname. They moved closer and brushed their melons against his skin as they asked him to come over to their place to teach them some of his secrets. Vino was flustered and didn't know what to say to them. After feeling that bad energy, the two girls suddenly felt a shiver down their spine. They moved away and waved goodbye at him. Another thud was heard, and the floor suddenly cracked. Canadia was behind him, emitting that dangerous energy. Vino looked behind nervously and heard her say she didn't care who he would love. He started sweating coldly when she pulled out her sword and said if Vino would love another woman, she would end her life now. Vino gasped and reminded her she was trying to improve her status, and that doing this would worsen things about black-haired people. Vino finally realized that Canadia was furious and had no idea what she was saying, so he took a deep breath and calmly told her not to worry, because he would never let go of her. He looked at her eyes and said he would remain by her side. She giggled as she felt butterflies inside her stomach. Milva cleared her throat to get their attention and announced that they would be officially taking the certification exam to become S-rank adventurers. The two were dumbfounded and speechless by the news. Milva congratulated them, so Vino confirmed if they could really participate in the examination. Milva nodded and showed them their names on the documents, because their skills were praised in that cannonball battle. He looked closer to check and grabbed Canadia to congratulate her. She smiled and said she was one more step closer to her dream. A random girl cheered on her and called her the fallen angel. He leaned closer and asked if being called the fallen angel was okay to her, but she didn't care, and it made her happy. Milva told them their exam would be in 3 days. The two nodded, but Vino wanted to throw his ears through the window when they started cheering the potion maniac. He sighed and thought this all sounded like an insult to him. As they walked around, Canadia's eyes were sparkling, and she was drooling at all of the delicious foods in the stalls. She was so excited looking around, but noticed Vino's timidness and nervousness. She called him to get his attention, so he explained he was only worried he might run into his previous guild, because this was their base. She smiled and told him he didn't have to relive the past anymore, because they would return to their cozy town after passing their exam. He smiled and thanked her. She scoffed and said she would also kick their butts if they came across those traitors. When the two went to the guild, the receptionist showed them the way to the room at the back. As they were walking, he noticed a familiar face and thought it was was the guildmaster of the trading town. He greeted him, but was given a cold stare. The guildmaster gritted his teeth at them and ignored them. Kanadia rolled her eyes and commented that she hated that person. Now that he is out of the assault party, the guildmaster sees him as his enemy, maybe because of the compensation system his previous party used. He knew that the guildmaster realized how crucial it was for the guildmaster's position to cover up his fake death, only for the money, and even made Kanadia work alone, as a form of harassment against black-haired people. Kanadia noticed the adventurers' piercing stares, so they figured they must have been talking behind their backs. She asked what could happen if they failed the exam, so he bluntly said everyone would laugh at their faces. Kanadia chuckled and said she was confident they could overcome anything together. Vino smiled and agreed with her. When they stopped before the door to their assigned room, Vino knocked and heard a woman's voice telling them to come inside. They went in and saw a short-haired girl, an S-ranker named Amelie Alls, also known as the Windmill. Vino greeted her, and Amelie was surprised he knew her. Vino smiled brightly and said everyone knows the S-ranker Windmill. Amelie chuckled awkwardly and told Kanadia and Vino to drop the honorifics with her. Vino nodded in response. Amelie said their ages were close, but when she revealed she was 25, Vino almost choked because she was way older than them. He was stunned and didn't know what to reply to, but suddenly felt Kanadia's shivering jealous glare. Amelie took the paper and said it was amazing how they took that dragon. She added that the fallen angel was strong and doubted that the potion maniac was weak. She looked at them, released a breath, and said it had been a while since they had someone worthy of the S rank, so she was getting excited. Amelie tossed the paper and grinned at Kanadia, saying she had a perfect body. She looked up and down and asked how old she was. When Kanadia said she was 16, Amelie gasped in shock and started tickling her. Kandia laughed and fell to the floor. She almost died from laughing. Luckily, Amelie finally found her weak spot, which was her armpits. Amelie suddenly looked at him and asked if he wanted to join. He immediately refused, so Amelie returned her focus to Kanadia. Her eyes were teary as she begged Vino for help, but his cheeks were too red from Kanadia's voice cuteness. Kanadia begged her to do it to Vino instead, but she replied by saying she liked cute girls more. Kanadia glared at her and tried to avoid her. Before they could start another tickle fight, Vino asked where the test would be happening. Amelie got distracted and said the test would be held in an S-rank dungeon called the Nightless Corridor. When they got out of the room, the adventurers in the lobby were staring at them. While walking, Windmill said she had already filed a complaint for letting an A-ranker operate alone in the guild in the royal capital. She sighed and said if she had known sooner that Kanadia was alone, she would have taken her in. It was rare for an S-ranker to recruit A-rankers to their guild, but it would be possible with Kanadia's skills. When Amelie said if Kanadia would join her, she would spend an hour tickling her. Kanadia tried to run away in fear. When they were done trolling around, Amelie said the dungeon was about an hour's walk from there, and when they were about to march forward, a familiar voice stopped them. Vino froze after realizing who it was. Amelie peeked behind Vino and asked what they wanted. As Vino turned around, he saw the faces of his previous party, the assault party. Tommy, the leader, was gritting his teeth as he asked what was happening. Vino remained silent, but Ostel went to Amelie, asking how the useless potion master and the Grim Reaper got to take the S-rank exam, and they didn't. He added that their party had the greatest potential of becoming an S-rank out of all the guilds. He kept saying they were better than the two, but Amelie was getting annoyed, so she warned him to watch his tone towards her. Ostel flinched in fear, so Amelie pointed at Tommy, asking if he was the leader. When he nodded, Amelie asked if he really thought their party could pass the exam, but nobody had the courage to speak. Vino sighed and asked why they weren't boasting about how they could surpass an A-rank dungeon, but they cursed him for talking rudely. They added that Vino was only relying on the Grim Reaper's strength, but he scoffed, saying their party couldn't even clear the A-rank quest when he left them. Kanadia added that they all relied on Vino's potion too much and didn't hone their skills enough. Before Ostel could say anything more, Amina stopped him, admitted that she had relied on Vino's potion, and asked Vino if she could purchase some of his potions. Ostel dropped his jaw in shock. Amina joined the assault party because she respected Tommy back when he was still a decent guy. She improved herself for 4 years, and if their party didn't get this twisted, Amina had so much potential. Vino offered a bottle for a large silver coin, but Ostel cussed and said that the pricing was ridiculous. Vino turned around and said, "Good luck clearing B-rank quests." That statement crushed Tommy's ego. He clenched his jaw and called Vino's name. When he stopped, he asked him to a duel with a condition that if the assault party won, the S-rank exam had to be cancelled. He also asked if he thought there was no limit to his tyranny. Tommy clicked a sound from his tongue. Looks like his friends don't know about his plan for the duel. Rune pulled Ostel and asked if he knew about the duel. Ostel shook his head and said they hadn't talked about it. They all knew Tommy was indeed qualified to be the leader. However, he was weak in unpredictable situations. Vino knew Tommy was more than Ostel and Rune, who were just talkers. He thought he had to finish this without getting Kanadia involved, so he agreed to the duel. He confidently said he would crush them all by himself. Amelie sighed in disbelief and said he should decide on his own. She added that she would be waiting for the winning party at the entrance. He turned, said good luck to them, and whispered she was certain Vino would take them out in no time. Kanadia brightly smiled and agreed with her. The two were stunned when the healer raised his hand and said he would pass on the duel. Vino realized it was the newly recruited healer. Gal said he would not get involved in their personal disputes and didn't want to get hurt by the man who blasts the cannonball dragon with missiles. Another hand raised, and it was Amina. She also said she wouldn't fight Vino because what Tommy said was absurd. She lowered her head and said they tried to hurt him, and she couldn't stomach that they were trying to take even more from Vino. He suddenly remembered how shocked Amina was during that time, and it seemed like she didn't know about the plan to use him as a decoy. Ostel patted her shoulder and said they wouldn't force her to do this. Rune said she would take part in it, since they could have a chance to get to the exam through this. Tommy scoffed and told Vino he would face the three of them by himself, but Vino smiled and said he could deal with them. Ostel scoffed and said he had now become a big talker. Canadia asked if he would be alright, since he was outnumbered, but Vino told her not to worry. Vino was confident because he knew how these three fought like the back of his palm, so he had an absolute advantage. She smiled at him and cheered on him. He smiled and said he would settle things and return to her. They all moved to the training grounds for the duel. Some adventurers noticed the crowd inside the training ground. Vino and the three went to the stage. Gal still couldn't believe that the potion maniac was full of confidence, so he wondered if he would plan on sending numerous missiles at these monkeys, but Amina was sure Vino had the plan to secure his victory. She sighed and thought she wouldn't be happy if Tommy won this duel. Meanwhile, Canadia was closing her eyes tightly, praying for the best for Vino. He told the three to come at him whenever they were ready. Rune smirked and was about to cast the first move, but she was stunned when a potion bottle was in her mouth, and chugging it down by reflex. The assault party was confused when she started coughing, and when Vino revealed it was a silent potion to prevent Rune from chanting magic, Rune's face turned pale. Vino threw an empty bottle at her, which went straight at her forehead. Ostel was surprised to see her faint on the floor with that bottle. He cursed Vino for his pathetic trick. Vino knew Ostel wouldn't stop calling him useless, so when he swung the sword, Vino deflected it with his bottle. Ostel was caught off guard by how Vino parried his sharp blade. The potion master suddenly asked why he had become such a coward. He pulled out another bottle and swiftly threw it in Ostel's direction. When the bottle shattered from the impact, Ostel was shocked by the painful stimulus that radiated through his shield. Vino threw another bottle and asked him if he enjoyed the delicious potions he had made for them before. Ostel grunted in pain and dropped to his knee. He was dumbfounded by what was happening, so Vino asked if he really thought he was only deflecting it because the potion earlier from that parry contained a conductive liquid that if he threw a thunder potion with a lightning attribute like this, the bolts out travel through his limbs and body easily now. Ostel screamed in pain when his body was almost roasted from that attack. Tommy dropped his jaw in shock. He watched his teammates fall one by one, so Vino asked if he was the type of leader who would only watch his team fall without doing anything. Tommy grunted and didn't know what to say. He didn't expect Vino to be able to use his potion in offense, so he lowered his sword. Vino said Tommy was talkative, but always went silent during important times. He told him not to show up in front of him ever again, and just bow his head if he needed some potion from him. He turned and started walking. However, Tommy was triggered. He clenched his sword tightly and raised his sword. Amina dropped his jaw and wondered why Tommy was still holding his sword. She was about to stop Tommy, but Canadia was already running towards the stage. Amina was left speechless when Candia told Vino to get down. Luckily, Vino turned around and saw Tommy right behind him. His body froze in shock, but Canadia pushed him to the ground to save him. He opened his eyes and saw her on top of him. He called her name, and when she raised her head, she said she was fine. Vino gasped upon realizing she had a wound on her beautiful face. Vino's face turned blank. He took a potion and told her to drink it. He apologized and placed a clean cloth on her wound. He stood up and faced Tommy. He cursed and thought it was his fault for letting his guard down. He cursed Tommy for sneaking up to him the second time, making him tremble in fear. Canadia was speechless about how Vino cursed Tommy for threatening the people important to him. He added that he would never forgive him for hurting his friend. Vino gritted his teeth angrily and asked if he knew what this meant. Tommy started sweating cold and nervous, and when Vino threw a potion straight into his mouth, he had no choice but to chug it down by reflex. When he realized what he was doing, his body was already numb. He couldn't move it because it went paralyzed and would immobilize him. Vino suddenly threw numerous potions in the air all at once. It was around 99 bottles, and with the bottles in the air, Vino cast his potion Gatling, and it seemed like the JoJo demon inside his was too strong. The bullet-like potions dashed towards him in a blink. Vino remained silent as he watched Tommy scream in pain. The people who witnessed it dropped their jaws in shock. Even Amelie, who went there to check them out of worry, almost peed her diaper in shock. She couldn't believe one could use potions to attack someone. She kept talking to herself, making the other adventurers find it cute. Tommy eventually fainted and fell to the floor unconscious. Vino hoped this man would keep the pain in his mind. He looked back to Canadia and apologized for being careless. She smiled and said keeping him safe as his vanguard was her job. Vino smiled softly and assisted her. The three assault members were still in the dreamland, making Gal sigh in disbelief. Amina approached them and called Vino with hesitation in her voice. He looked at her and greeted her. Amina bowed her head and apologized for abandoning him in the dungeon. Her voice seemed to be sincere when she said she only got scared, and all she could think of at that time was to escape from the S-rank monster. She sighed, said she wouldn't force him to forgive her, and added that she had always regretted what happened. Vino suddenly blurted out that he also thinks that it was because of him that the assault party became corrupt. He thought that if he had only realized his potential, things would be different, and their party would still be complete. He moved closer closer and asked if she would stay at that party. Amina nodded in response, so he asked Gal the same thing. Gal looked away and admitted that he hated how their party does things, but added that they still have talents. He looked at Amina and said he would keep an eye on them and ensure he could also take the S-rank exam. He huffed an air out and blurted out that he wouldn't let Vino outshine him as the healer, but Vino didn't mind his attitude because he seemed to be a good guy. The two bid their goodbyes and goodbye to them because they had to go to Amelie for the exam. As they parted ways, Vino looked back and figured this would be the point he had to aim high with his new comrades and hope for the best for everyone. When Tommy regained consciousness, Gal greeted him and called him an idiot for using a sneaky tactic. Tommy got up, groaning in pain. Gal sighed and said they had to start all over again after their defeat. Amina's dark aura was felt, and she was walking towards Tommy while cracking her knuckles. Gal panicked and tried to calm her down, but she bonked Tommy's head gently. The two were speechless, but Amina sighed and said this was the best she could do to punish him for trying to harm their friend again. Tommy stared blankly as he realized what he had done. He took a deep breath and said it was a crushing defeat. Amina offered her hand and asked him to swear to become a real adventurer from this point. Tommy looked at her hand and apologized for everything he did. He took her hand and thanked her, saying he would try his best to become a better adventurer. On the other hand, Amelia had finally arrived in the dungeon after running rapidly. She was relieved that she had arrived before them, so when Canadia called her, she excitedly said that Vino won the duel. Amelie tried to hide her exhaustion and congratulated him. She looked at him and asked if he could really fight with his potion. When Vino said yes, she opened the dungeon's gate and went inside. A staircase welcomed them that would lead to the underground. He asked about the exam, but Amelie only said it was a surprise, so they had to deal with every monster they would encounter inside the dungeon. Vino scanned the area as they walked, and new monsters inside this dungeon would be far stronger. He told Canadia to back him up if he couldn't defeat a monster with his potions. Canadia agreed and took a deep breath. Amelie noticed her nervousness, so she moved closer and told her not to worry. She placed her hands on their shoulder and told Vino that things would be easier for them with his Gatling potion. Vino was surprised Amelie knew about his new technique, so he asked how he knew it. However, Amelie ignored him and started bugging Canadia. She squished her sides and told her to be confident. As Amelie teased the two, they suddenly heard some growling and footsteps nearby. 4 monsters emerged from the shadows, and they were all made out of machines. Amelie said these kinds of monsters had the ability to self-repair and told them to show her what they got. Vino and Canadia raised their guards to prepare to engage in battle. Vino moved forward and scanned every opponent ahead of them. He told Canadia to try to save her energy because he would try to deal with them alone with his potion shot. When the monsters simultaneously attacked, Vino pulled a potion and swung his arm to throw some potions at them. The impact was enough to take them all down with one hit. Vino was relieved that the monster didn't get to regenerate, but he told her they still had to keep their guard up. Canadia nodded, and they marched forward. Amelie was behind them, amazed about their technique and skills. She had been an examiner for 4 years, and the assault party was indeed a candidate for this exam, but since they had some ties with some antisocial fractions, they were prevented from taking the S-rank exam. She was also aware of the rumor that they all tried to exterminate one of their party members, which added to why they didn't get to take the exam. Canadia had achieved remarkable victories in the Cannonball Dragon battle, so Amelie was certain she was worthy of being an S-rank. After the exam, she plans to call Canadia to the Royal Capital Guild, but she thinks Vino's skills and talent are quite interesting. She expected him to be a support, but after learning that he was the one who had led the Cannonball fight, she realized that the two would be an asset to the Royal Capital. The three went ahead with the path and encountered another door with unique patterns on it. Canadia moved closer and wondered if she should place her hand on it. She placed her hand and was surprised after hearing a voice saying the Black People factor had been confirmed. A hidden door on the wall suddenly opened, making Canadia excited. Vino suddenly noticed Amelie stunned on the side, so he asked if she was alright. Amelie stuttered when she said it was nothing. Vino nodded and went inside the door while Amelie screamed inside her brain, because this path had been an unexplored route for decades. She was sweating cold as she pondered if she had to stop them there. They were supposed to enter a room on the other side, but Canadia accidentally found this hidden room. She considered canceling the exam but also wanted to investigate the newly found area. She thought she would just help them if the two couldn't handle the situation anymore, so she did not stop them. She asked Vino if it was alright to throw potions because he might run out, so he said he only used 100 during the duel earlier, so they would be fine. Amelie was dumbfounded when Vino added that he still had 827 bottles left. She asked Canadia if what he was saying made sense, but Canadia told her to just believe what she saw because Vino could store 1,000 bottles in that pocket. Amelie told them she would step in if things went out of hand as they walked down. Vino asked about the dungeon, but Amelie said she didn't know much of its details. He shrugged his shoulders and said he didn't mind because he was curious about why the voice earlier only recognized black-haired people. Canadia said that black people were the old name of the village where she was born and raised, but her parents didn't explain to her about their people as they thought she was too young at that time. Amelie nodded and said there was indeed a story of a long-ago uprising between the black and white people, but the white people lived in the north, so they didn't know about it. She added that hearing from Canadia's acquaintances would be better if they wanted to know. Amelie suddenly remembered the beautiful white-haired maiden in the capital capital of the white nation. Vino was glad they were able to find this place, which seemed to be a ruin left by the black people, thanks to Canadia. Canadia had agreed to explore the place and return home after. As they went deeper, they found a dead end. Huge boulders of rocks were blocking the way, but they noticed a spot where they could crawl into. Canadia excitedly volunteered to go first, so she crawled in. She sighed and said it was too narrow that her melons might not make it to the other side. Emily found a chance to tickle Canadia again, so she pulled her boots and started tickling her. Candia was screaming and laughing inside the hole. She begged her to stop, but Emily stopped when Vino asked if it would be alright to explore this area, since it had nothing to do with the test. Emily chuckled awkwardly after realizing Vino already noticed it. While Canadia managed to get to the other side, Emily asked Vino who would investigate this area if the investigation team couldn't access it without Canadia. Vino agreed to take a quick look at the very end and leave. He praised Emily for being reliable, since she had been an adventurer for years now, but she suddenly grabbed his neck and said she would show him what a woman's body was like. She snickered and thought teasing a younger boy like this was entertaining. On the other hand, Canadia could hear them, so she pulled out her sword and sliced the boulder to pieces. Emily and Vino's eyes widened in shock upon feeling that piercing glare. Canadia asked if they had fun without her. She said she had already unlocked a door nearby with her stern smile, making Vino tremble in fear. Canadia wiped her tears and said she would slice his fingers if he cheated on her again. Vino started sweating coldly and tried to explain he was only a victim, but Canadia pointed her blade against his neck and asked him to repeat it, so Vino screamed in fear and walked ahead. The three arrived in a wide dome. There were markings on the floor, and they were surprised to see a hologram of a person with a cloak, saying the white nation's invasion had already begun. Canadia was surprised that the voice was responding to her, but the voice suddenly said she had to be tested if she was worthy of the inheritance. A huge metal gate opened and revealed a gigantic monster made out of steel. Emily sighed and said it was something they should worry about now, but Canadia seemed to think this was still part of her S-rank examination, so she was excited. Emily called her and said the test was over because she needed to draw the monster's attention while they ran for the exit. Canadia was surprised and didn't know what to say. Vino moved closer and said he had finally found something worthy of unleashing his potion-throwing ability and wanted to test his skills. Emily sighed in disbelief, but suddenly flinched when Canadia said this might be the final trial given to them as a couple. She still thinks of this as a part of the exam, so Emily sighed and said she would step in if things go bad. She gave them permission to attack, so the two sprinted forward in excitement. Emily figured this beast was a crystalline monster with over 100 crystals attached to its body for defense. When the monster released some sharp crystals toward them, Vino opened some bottles to make a barrier. The liquid created a half circle to protect them from the incoming crystals. Amazing Emily for his wittiness, Canadia leaped to the side in mid-air. She used her second form and swung the blade through the monster's flesh. The monster screamed in pain after the blow, so Vino followed up an attack by throwing a potion at the monster. However, the bottle exploded against a barrier. Vino was shocked to see the monster using a barrier, so Canadia moved ahead for another attack. She leaped and used her fifth form. She pulled her sword and slashed it against the monster, but her eyes widened because the barrier from its horn repelled her blade. The crystal monster growled in anger and shot sharp crystals at her. Canadia could not move mid-air to dodge it, so she took the blow and got wounded. Vino screamed her name worriedly, so he immediately took a potion out and threw it at her mouth. Canadia chugged the healing potion, and her body fully recovered when she landed on the floor. Emily was impressed by how Vino precisely threw the potion, but she found it disgusting to shove a bottle into a girl's mouth like that. She continued to cheer on the two, so when Vino made another attack, he threw numerous potions in the air. He dashed, grabbing each potion mid-air and throwing at the monster one by one. It managed to pass through the barrier and created damage to the monster. Emily was glad they could pass through its defense. Canadia was also running towards the potions near her and knocked them to send them flying to the monster. They managed to cut off the crystals, but there was still not enough firepower. They decided to launch attacks non-stop, but the monster suddenly screamed loudly. They covered their ears from the painful noise. Emily knew the building might collapse if this continued. The monster's head suddenly gleamed brightly, and some electricity currents were emitting from it. Emily warned them about the incoming dangerous attack, so Vino told Canadia that they had to do Plan C, which they didn't get to do during the cannonball fight. Emily was confused when Canadia started chugging down bottles, and when she was done, she started feeling lighter. Vino ran to her and carried her body. He carried her and ran forward. By filling Canadia with those buffs, she had become a potion woman. Vino handled her with care and threw her in the air like how he does with his potions. Canadia withdrew her sword, shocking Emily because Vino treated Canadia like a potion. While Canadia was in the air, she swung her sword for her fifth form. She sliced the monster's body multiple times within a second. That attack pierced through the monster's barrier and managed to make fatal blows. As she landed on the floor, it was the same time as the monster fell on the floor defeated. Emily smiled and was glad the two defeated the S-rank monster alone. She ran towards them to congratulate them, but Canadia suddenly dropped to her knees. Her body was shaking, so Emily approached her to check on her, but she suddenly stood up hurriedly, saying she had to go pee. Vino chuckled awkwardly, as he figured 10 bottles was Canadia's limit. When they got out of the dungeon, it was already night. They breathed fresh air, so while they were resting, resting, Amelie thanked them for passing the S-rank promotion exam. She added that even if they did not go through that unexplored area, they would still pass the exam with ease. Amelie told them they could now live in the capital with their new house, but they were stunned to see Canadia bawling her eyes out. She wiped her tears and said she was only happy because she was one step closer to her dream. Amelie hugged her and congratulated her, but suddenly started tickling her. Canadia couldn't laugh hard anymore from exhaustion, so Vino approached her and said he was able to go this far because he had her. He thanked her for staying by his side. He added that they should celebrate for now because they would be busy in the capital when they moved there. Canadia smiled brightly and agreed with him. On the other side of the town, a woman standing on the rooftop was watching over the city with a devilish grin. She whispered in the air that she would make the sky La Paz Lazuli hers sooner. After a few months, Vino was returning from his journey. A group of skeletons was chasing their carriage, so they were in a hurry. The owner of the carriage panicked and asked Vino to do something. Vino looked behind and said they could outrun the undead army at their current speed, but the man was getting worried that his goods and wagon might get damaged. Some zombie birds suddenly appeared above them, so the man alerted Vino. He looked above and threw a potion at them to knock them off. The man was surprised because he could defeat the zombies with a potion bottle. While they were talking, the man suddenly halted his horses because a headless creature stood before them. The armored creature had a horse's body, so Vino figured it was Dullahan, the wielder of ice magic. The monster grasped its spear tightly, so the man asked him to do something about this monster. Vino thought he had to protect the wagon for his quest, so when the Dullahan swung its arm backward, he thought he had to land his attack first before the monster shot at them. He threw the potion hard, and luckily, the bottle pierced through the monster's armor. The Dullahan growled as it turned to ashes in defeat. After a few seconds, Vino smiled, and they continued their journey back. They had finally arrived at their destination, the kingdom of Tistaria. The man released an air of relief because he thought it was the last day of his life. Vino cheered him up, so the man thanked him for saving his life. He asked for his name, so Vino introduced himself and said he was an S-rank adventurer of the Royal Capital Guild. The man gasped in shock after realizing he was the famous potion maniac. Vino choked in shock and told him not to call him a potion maniac, but a potion lord instead. Vino finished his quest and returned to their apartment when they parted ways. His body was aching from exhaustion, and when he opened his door, he immediately smelled the curry. He smiled as Canadia welcomed him home. She smiled at him and asked if he wanted to eat or bathe first. Vino said he would eat first, so Canadia prepared the table. It had been 4 months since they started living together. He planned on living in a separate house, but then Canadia was persistent in saying it was only natural for them to live together. Canadia pulled the chair to sit and thanked him for his hard work this week. Vino said he had been out for some quests all week and asked her how things were going in the capital. Canadia said the rumored phantom thief had become active again, so Guillaume was now holding an event in the aristocratic district. Vino asked about how she was doing, and she said she had been assisting with the kingdom's military training. She added that they treated her terribly at first, but when she beat up the chief, they became nicer. For the last month, she had been training soldiers in the royal army and had a growing fan base after she defeated the captain. A knight even asked her for dinner, but she refused him because she wanted to be with her husband. She proudly said she was devoted to her husband, making Vino wonder what their relationship looks like to people. Canadia excitedly said the people view them as the ideal couple. Vino had realized their perception of their relationship was different. Vino used to think she was only joking around, but Canadia was so opinionated that she meant everything she said. Vino could admit he had feelings for her. Even if they were now adults, Vino still didn't want to become a married man yet. Canadia kept talking about how Vino hit on her and asked her to be his wife, making Vino wonder if he should marry this girl. Out of the blue, Canadia's facial expression changed drastically. She stared blankly at him and coldly said she could smell 8 different women from his personal belongings. She walked to her sword and said she could smell Milva and Amelie on him. Vino tried to calm her down in fear, but when she leaned closer and said she could smell a prostitute on him, he suddenly remembered a girl who had gone to him to pour some drinks. He was still amazed and horrified at how Canadia could smell every woman he encountered in a week. She might be a submissive and sweet girl, but whenever she gets the idea that he is being unfaithful, her blood rushes to her head and anger takes over her. Canadia might not remember, but the house and his body were covered in sword cuts. Vino was in debt to her and couldn't deny that she was usually very kind and sweet, so he decided to keep things like this. He tried to redirect the conversation by saying they still had to wake up in the morning for their quest, and it was effective since Canadia got excited because they would be doing a quest together again. When he was done cleaning himself, he went to his room to study the quest. Canadia knocked on the door and asked if she could sleep with him. This was one of the reasons why she wanted to be with her, despite her extreme love. Canadia hugged her pillow and lay beside him. She tucked herself in the blanket and said goodnight to him. After a few minutes, Canadia had already drifted to her sleep. Vino was still awake and thought she could sleep easily because she just trusted him that much. When Canadia suddenly turned to her side, Vino's cheeks turned red because she was too close. He closed his eyes tightly and got up. He knew he couldn't sleep at this rate, so he opened his drawer and took a sleeping potion for this night again. It might be tempting to think that he could touch her while sleeping, but he thought Canadia had to be awake and conscious if he would be doing it. However, there was one problem with the sleep potion. When the sun was shining, Vino slowly slowly woke up, and when he realized he was already touching her melons, he jolted up and thought his body just moved on its own. Luckily, Canadia was a sleepyhead and never woke up first. After a few seconds, she woke up and noticed her shirt was all wrinkled again. She fixed it while he tried to look away and say she had a bad sleeping posture. He couldn't help but feel guilty about what was happening when he was out due to the potion. When they got out, the two went to the mountain. Canadia said it had been 3 weeks since the two of them went on a quest together. She frowned her brows and said his popularity was also a problem, because Amelie was now asking Vino to team up with her. Their quest was to take down the S-rank monster bird called Terrawave. Vino said its baby birds had a habit of collecting shiny objects, and seemed to be stealing artworks and jewelry from the capital. Their quest was to retrieve and exterminate these monsters. When they arrived at the foot of the Mount Phoenix, they discussed how they could reach the flying bird easily, but they suddenly heard some growling sound nearby. 3 high-level wolves had occurred, so Vino raised his guard up, but Canadia suddenly moved and used her third form called the Wind Wheel Slash. With one swing, the wolves were taken down. Vino was speechless when Canadia said she wouldn't be a burden to him anymore. He suddenly remembered how she was trembling when they fought against some wolves back then. He smiled and thought she had a beautiful and reliable companion in this quest. He was glad to be with someone like her. A ring was placed on the ground that afternoon, and a small bird came down after a few seconds. The bird landed near the ring, so Vino became alerted, because they now had to follow the bird to their nest. Canadia glared at him for using the ring she gave as bait. Vino apologized and said that was the only jewelry he had. He promised to take it back and have it repaired, but she said this would be a good opportunity for him to give her a wedding ring worth 3 months' salary. Vino shrieked in shock and tried to divert the topic. The bird flew away with the ring, so he pointed it out. Canadia sighed and hoped Vino would take what she said seriously. The two followed the bird immediately and finally spotted the nest. Vino reminded her to be careful, because after the baby bird placed the ring on the nest and took off, the mother was guarding the jewelry. The monster was glancing at its treasures when it spotted the two below her. Canadia took a leap, so Vino cheered on her. As she sprinted up to the mountain, she prepared herself to engage in battle, but the bird suddenly screamed and tried to attack her. Vino thought he had to help distract the bird first, so he threw a bottle towards the bird's neck. The bird growled and glared at him. The bird flew and flapped its wings to create a tornado. Vino figured this bird could do wind-type magic, but he confidently turned the tornado off with his potion parry. Canadia swung her sword with her 6th form when it was gone, and released the Sky Slash technique. The bird saw it coming and managed to escape on time. The bird had given up its nest and was now trying to escape. Canadia signaled him, so Vino pulled another bottle and threw it in her direction. She jumped and grabbed the incoming potion containing wind attributes and bomb debris. When opened, this potion flew her up into the sky like a jet. Canadia blasted in the air, and when she got ahead of the monster, she grabbed her sword tightly, and with the use of gravity and her strength, she sliced the monster's body in half. Blood splattered out, and as she fell, she calmly looked below. Vino smiled as he looked at her face. She flew down slowly like a fallen angel. He said that he missed seeing this fallen angel. Canadia chuckled and said that the potion had slightly burnt her hand, so he quickly grabbed a healing potion. She said that her hands were pretty injured, so she couldn't handle a bottle, so Vino threw the bottle straight to her mouth. After drinking, Canadia scolded him for shoving the bottle too fast. They were exhausted when they returned to their apartment, because it took them 2 days to carry all these stolen jewels down the mountain. It was way harder than taking down the beast. Vino looked at the treasures in amazement. He was about to tell Canadia they had to return this to the guild tomorrow, but she was already inside his room. She lay on his bed, and after a few seconds, she drifted out of sleep in exhaustion. Vino chuckled and told her she had to eat at least and take a bath first, but she wasn't responding. He smiled softly as he tucked her inside the blanket. He sat on a table nearby and watched her charming sleeping face. He stared at her for a few minutes, but suddenly started feeling sleepy. When he woke up, he was surprised that he fell asleep, so he got up and stretched his limb to go to bed. The following day, they head to the Royal Capital Guild. Canadia was anxiously waiting for Vino inside the room for the report. She was pacing back and forth in nervousness, and when Vino got out, he looked pale. She asked how it went, and if they would be demoted to A rank, so he replied by saying the guildmaster wasn't that mad, but he couldn't believe someone stole the jewels in one night. Vino was stunned in shock earlier, after realizing that half of the jewels were already gone. Canadia kept apologizing for being asleep the whole time. He grabbed his face and said they had to find the culprit first. In the middle of their conversation, a familiar voice greeted and thanked them for their hard work. Milva offered a drink to cheer him up, surprising him, and asking what she was doing in the capital's guild. Milva said she went there to cover 2 gaps in the reception staff at the capital. She added that the rumors about him being the potion maniac were still going around. Vino ignored what she said because he was glad Milva was there. She brought up the cannonball battle and said she would never forget Canadia's angelic face. She chuckled and asked Milva to go shopping with her again, so she replied with a smile and nodded in response. The guild started buzzing, making them wonder what was happening. Milva called Pelyust, a double S-rank adventurer. He waved at her and greeted her back. He walked to her and said it had been a while since he met her in Crafttown. Milva smiled and talked to him like her close friend. Vino knew this guy as a world traveler, highly skilled in swordsmanship and magic, and was also famous for his archery technique. Vino met Pelyust back then, so when their their eyes met, Pelluest called him. He patted his shoulder and said their master had squeezed him to death. He suddenly asked Vino to lend him some of his potions, so he excitedly nodded. Canadia greeted him and said she still had a long way to go before reaching her goal. Pelluest smiled and said he would be rooting for her. Vino noticed that these two had known each other. When Pelluest looked back at him, he asked if he would like to go on a quest with him the next time, so Vino agreed and thanked him for inviting him. Another group of adventurers called Pelluest bid goodbye and went to greet his friends. Milva found him cool, and Vino thought he would try his best to be at Pelluest's level someday. He suddenly felt an eerie dark aura behind him, so when he turned around, he was startled to see a man in a black cloak. The man glared at him as he asked if he was Vino, the potion user. He realized this weird man was the S-rank adventurer Sign, the kingdom's strongest wizard. Vino greeted him and said it was an honor to meet him, but was dumbfounded when Sign told him to stay away from him. He added that Vino was rumored to shove potions into people's mouths and make every woman around him serve him. Sign poked his cheeks aggressively and added that despite having a gorgeous girlfriend, he was still flirting with Milva and Amelie. Vino sighed and told him he was only at the same party as Canadia and was only friends with Milva and Amelie. Sign slammed his face on the floor in defeat and said he was jealous of him. Vino sighed and thought this frustrated man was hopeless. Sign cursed him for looking at him like he was a disappointment to him. He sighed and said he would invite him on their next quest instead, but they still had to find a thief first. Sign was confused, so Vino explained how the jewelry got lost. Sign told him to ask Emily for help because he still had an ongoing mission. Emily was free that day, so they decided to meet with her for a strategy meeting. While waiting for Emily, Canadia was proposing a strategy. Vino noticed Emily sneaking up to Canadia, so he remained silent. She moved closer and started tickling Canadia. The two fell to the ground as they played a little. Emily shoved a newspaper to Vino and told him to read the news. He took the paper and read that the Phantom thought Tina handed out treasures to help the poor again. He looked at the treasures on the paper and figured they were the same ones stolen from them. Emily said Tina had started showing up about 6 months ago. She was known to always steal from corrupt nobles and mafias, making Vino wonder if that thief saw him as an aristocrat. She said that the thief had an eye on him since he kept making those weird potions. Tina was so skilled that the royal guard could even catch her, so Vino thought they could clear their name if they could catch this thief. This phantom thief had been sending out notices, gathering people and making a grand appearance with her magic tricks. She used her skills to steal from her targets, anyone trying to harm the slums. Everything stolen was given to people experiencing poverty, and some called him the righteous thief. Emily said Team broke into his house because of those stolen treasures. Vino asked how this thief knew they had the treasure, but they figured she may have known in advance that they had defeated the stealing bird and would return home with the jewels. He suddenly realized that the treasures left in his house were from the Royal Museum of Art, but those stolen items had unknown origins or might belong to corrupt aristocrats. Canadia suddenly spoke after realizing that the ring, which symbolized the love she had given to Vino, had also been stolen. Amelie sighed and asked if Vino could just use his potion to catch the thief, but Vino said his potions were only for buffs, recovery, and a weapon. Amelie shrugged and said they should have lunch and consider it later. Canadia smiled and said she would love to cook for them. The three managed to buy some fresh fish and vegetables in the market before returning to the apartment. They were excited as they opened the door. Vino went inside first to help with the preparations, but was stunned to see someone rummaging through his things. The phantom thief was going through his stuff. Vino was shocked and realized this was the one who sneaked inside his house. He screamed and called her oof. Tina turned around and greeted them. She smiled at them and said she only came there to give them a warning card. She apologized before giving them a snickering smile. Vino gritted his teeth and figured this person surely wasn't using any voice changer, so she tried to attack her with a potion, but Tina easily dodged it. The phantom thief said she only planned to return everything that wasn't stolen but decided to return it some other time. She jumped out of the window and bid goodbye to them. Vino screamed for breaking his windows. When Tina landed on the streets, he looked around to find her, but she was nowhere to be seen. Frustratedly, he slammed the window and angrily said she should at least leave the repair fee behind. Canadia called him after spotting the message Tina left on the table. It says these jewels weren't stolen or belonged to criminals, so she returned them to him. Canadia added that they hadn't got his ring back, but she calmly said she might be able to locate the thief with it. Vino got confused, so Canadia said their rings were covered in dark magic, so if she activated the magic, a light would come out and show them the direction of the other ring, whenever and wherever. Vino's eyes widened in shock. Canadia proudly said it was magic she learned from her homeland, but Vino suddenly asked if she had been monitoring his whereabouts. Canadia avoided his gaze and did not answer him. That would only explain how she knew when he would return home, and how they had been running into each other during his work. Vino asked Amelie to tickle Canadia, so she approached and started attacking her excitedly. Canadia laughed and explained that it was only her duty to watch over her husband. This could turn things around, because they could now locate the thief, so they had to make preparations for their next encounter and retrieve that ring. He thought of trying new tricks to lure and catch the phantom thief, so after a few hours, the person in question was already finding her next target. She used her binoculars to check on the nearby private soldiers and royal guards. She noticed hundreds of onlookers. These people went there because she had sent a notice that she would come there. Everyone awaited her arrival because she had become famous for her work. The name name Phantom Thief Tina came from her older sister. Her target tonight was Count Phil Hell, a corrupt noble, because she recently heard their family brought in a famous treasure, and it might be the gene she had been looking for, the Sky Lapis Lazuli. This count uses his shady organization to force the slum to work long hours and avoid paying them proper wages, so Tina makes sure to steal things from bad people, sell them to a broker, and give them to the slum. Tina walked down the roof and hopped off to take the justice in her own way. He leaped on top of a lamppost. The people waiting for her looked at her as she welcomed everyone. She announced she would receive the gem from the Count's family tonight. She activated her illusion magic, and in a blink, she became invisible to everyone. Tina hopped off the lamppost and ran towards the gate, while everyone was in awe of her sudden disappearance. Her family has been skilled with illusion magic for generations, so she became an expert in the phantom thief business with her chivalrous skills as a thief. She thought getting inside the treasure room would only take 5 minutes. When she got inside, she chuckled and quickly spotted the stone. She looked closer at the stone and realized it wasn't the gem she had been looking for. She looked around a little and found some interesting papers next to the jewel, so when the guards spotted her, she smiled and activated her illusion magic again. The guards gasped and immediately ran to request a backup. When she got out to the terrace, the guard in that area was stunned to see her out of the blue. Tina threw the papers in the air and said it would be her present to all of them. The people below the building took the falling papers, and when Tina went off, they were shocked to realize that the papers contained the Count's family's secret archives. The reporters grinned as they figured it was a tax evasion record. While the people were going wild, the Phantom tried to take this chance to escape. She started to ponder what the newspaper's front page tomorrow would contain. When she arrived on the city's other side, she thought she only had a few more houses to check for the gem. She was also grateful to those S-rankers for retrieving those treasures from the bird, because she couldn't defeat it and look for the gem. When she was trying to hide from Vino and Canadia, she was surprised when a bottle of potion came rushing to her. She managed to evade it on time and heard Vino saying that he was amazed that he could dodge her throws. Tina looked at him and figured the potion maniac Vino had found her. She wondered how this guy found her, but the only thing she could think of at that time was to escape, so she activated her illusion magic again. After witnessing her magic power, Vino was amazed, so he had no choice but to close her eyes and follow her movements. He swung his arm and threw another bottle. The potion crashed against the wall, and some liquid splattered on Tina's clothes. Vino could now see her movements, so he threw another one, and the thief was shocked because the potion thrown at her was all over her body. She looked at it and realized the liquid was glowing. While she was distracted, Vino signaled Canadia, so she slid down the roof and jumped above the thief. She swung her sword at her, making Tina lean backward. The thief drew her daggers out and threw them in her direction. She was nervous because she knew it was the S-rank fallen angel. She knew it would be impossible for her to wind against them, but she still had to try her best. She increased her mirage and made clones of her body. This would cost a lot of magic power, so she couldn't cast it twice. She planned to escape using it, but Vino started throwing multiple potions in the air in one go. Tina was stunned because each clone had an incoming potion towards them. She knew she had no escape now, and when the bottle landed on her forehead, she lost balance and fell to the floor. She groaned as she rubbed her head. Canadia walked to her and used her zeroth form, the pepper splash. She sprinkled some pepper on her and made Tina sneeze. Candia immediately shoved a bottle into her mouth and made her drink it. Eventually, Tina started feeling sleepy and lost consciousness. Tina's older sister was the one who told her that Phantom Thief Tina was what their mother thinks suits her. Her sister said she would become a great phantom thief since she had more talent than she did. When their mother passed after giving birth to Tina, his older sister took over their phantom thief business. She was not interested in it at first, but since it was what her older sister wanted, she studied it. After 5 years, when she was 12, her sister became bedridden. They had no money to treat her since they lived in the slums of the royal capital. She thought of earning money by becoming a phantom thief, but her sister told her that evil shouldn't taint phantom thieves. Before passing away, her sister's last words were that if she got lost, she should take the Sky Lapis Lazuli so she could fly in the sky. After that dream, Tina gasped for air when she woke up. She noticed that her hands were tied up. She tried to take it off, but it was too tight. Vino heard her moving, so he went closer. Tina figured she was on a restraint table, and when Vino took her witch hat and mask off, he was surprised to see a cute face. Tina's face turned red after hearing it. She called him a pervert and asked if he would be sticking his potions in some weird places, but Vino immediately denied it. She thought this potion maniac would sexually harass her with his potion, so she was getting so nervous. She blurted out that she would endure any torture and wouldn't say anything for a phantom thief's pride. Vino sighed and said they had to use their secret weapon if she wouldn't talk. Tina was sweating, cold and nervous, but this was the day she would see hell. Let me just show you how Vino and Canadia's first day living together happened. Canadia was excited about the cozy place with her husband, and even their love nest to nurture their love together, but Vino refused her and said he had his own room. That night also, Canadia went to his room to sleep beside him, and he could not refuse her anymore. While their life continued under one roof, the phantom thief was on the rise at that time. Tina romanticized every article she saw. She was proud of her work, but suddenly, she noticed the wrinkles on her outfit. She gasped in shock to see how her hair was messed up on the day of her infiltration into the Philhellen family. She used every hair product to make her hair perfect and ensure she would look her best tonight. Amelie was scanning flying through the newspaper about the Phantom Thief and commented that Tina had become even cuter than before. Vino was dumbfounded and said that Emily might find it charming for someone wearing a mask, but he almost choked when she started saying she wanted to touch Tina because she might not have qualities like Canadia. Chapters end at 17. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you loved this manga. Have a good day.